A cafeteria tray crashes to the floor. Laughter erupts like wildfire. Two black girls sit motionless as cruel words slice through the air. But their stillness isn't weakness. It's the calm before a storm nobody saw coming. This is the story of Naomi and Nia Walker twin sisters who turned silence into strength and proved that true power doesn't shout. It strikes with precision. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far their story travels. The September sun had barely burned through the morning fog when Naomi and Nia Walker stepped through the iron gates of Riverside High for the first time. The school loomed before them like a fortress of privilege, red brick walls weathered by decades of tradition, manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than their entire apartment building, and students who moved with the careless confidence that came from never having to prove they belonged. The twins walked in sync, as they always did. Matching braids crowned their heads in intricate patterns their mother had woven the night before, each twist a prayer for protection. Their backpacks, second-hand but clean, hung from shoulders that remained perfectly straight, despite the weight of being new. Being different, being watched. Inside Riverside High smelled like floor polish and money. The hallways gleamed under fluorescent lights, lined with trophy cases that reflected generations of wealthy families who'd walked these same halls. Photos of state championship teams, debate club winners, and smiling graduates headed to Ivy League schools created a visual hierarchy that made its message clear: this place wasn't built for everyone. Locker 247 and 248, Naomi murmured, checking the wrinkled paper in her hand. Her voice was soft but steady, the kind of quiet that came from being the older twin by exactly 7 minutes, a fact she'd never let Nia forget. Right side of B Hall. Nia confirmed, her eyes scanning the crowd with the same methodical precision their father had taught them. Notice everything. React to nothing. Control is the first weapon. The twins found their lockers wedged between a poster for homecoming court elections and a bulletin board announcing tryouts for sports they'd never heard of. As they organized their books, whispers rippled through the hallway like wind through tall grass. Who are they? Transfer students, I heard. From where the city? Look at their hair. Do you think they're sisters, or... Naomi's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Nia's hand found her twin's wrist, a gentle squeeze that said, "We've survived worse." And they had. After their father died 2 years ago in a car accident that the insurance company fought tooth and nail to not pay out on, after their mother worked 3 jobs to keep them fed, after moving from their comfortable suburban home to a studio apartment where the walls were so thin they could hear their neighbor's television through the plaster they had survived. This was just another test. The morning classes passed in a blur of syllabi and sideways glances. Teachers stumbled over their names during roll call, some not even trying to get the pronunciation right. By third period, Naomi had been asked if she was the athletic type twice, while Nia had been told she should really consider joining the diversity committee, as if her entire purpose at Riverside High was to be a checkbox on someone's inclusion spreadsheet. But it was lunch that revealed the true architecture of power at Riverside High. The cafeteria was a theater of social hierarchy made visible. The space was larger than their entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the room with natural light. Round tables dotted the space like islands, each one claimed by a different tribe. The theater kids clustered near the stage exit scripts spread between their trays. The athletes dominated the center, their Letterman jackets a uniform of belonging. The honor students huddled near the windows, textbooks propped against water bottles as they studied through lunch. And then there was the corner table by the vending machines. That's where Bradley Holt held court. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of effortless good looks that came from generations of good genetics and better nutrition. His sandy blonde hair fell perfectly across his forehead in a way that looked casual, but probably involved expensive product. He wore his privilege like a second skin, comfortable, unquestioned absolute. Around him sat his inner circle. Mason, his second in command, whose father owned half the commercial real estate downtown. Chelsea, whose mother sat on the school board and had personally funded the new athletic complex. Jake and Connor, twin brothers, though they looked nothing alike, whose family's law firm had represented Riverside's wealthy for 3 generations. They were untouchable. And they knew it. Naomi and Nia bought their lunch, the free lunch program their mother had signed them up for, with trembling hands and fierce pride, and scanned the cafeteria for somewhere to sit. Every table seemed full, or at least full enough that their arrival would be an intrusion. There, Nia nodded toward a small table in the far corner, partially hidden by a support column. 2 seats away from the main flow of traffic. Perfect. They settled in quietly, unpacking the lunch boxes their mother had prepared that morning before her shift at the hospital cafeteria. Leftover jollof rice in Tupperware containers still fragrant with tomatoes and spices, fried plantains wrapped in foil, a thermos of ginger tea to share. The smell wafted across the cafeteria, warm, spiced, unmistakably other. "Oh my God, what is that smell?" Chelsea's voice carried across the room, pitched loud enough to be heard, but wrapped in a laugh that gave her plausible deniability. Mason sniffed the air dramatically. "Smells like, I don't even know. What do you think Bradley Holt leaned back in his chair, his eyes finding the twins in their corner. A slow smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that predators wear when they've spotted prey that can't run. "I think," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone of someone who'd never been told no, "we should be more welcoming to our new students. Don't you think that's the Riverside way?" His table erupted in laughter that sounded like breaking glass. Naomi's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Nia's hand, hidden beneath the table, curled into a fist. But their faces remained perfectly neutral, a skill their father had drilled into them during years of martial arts training. "Never let them see you react," he'd said, adjusting Nia's stance during a late-night practice session in their garage. "Your face is a fortress. Your emotions are soldiers that only you command. The moment you show fear, anger, or pain, that's when you've already lost the fight." "Just ignore them," Naomi whispered so quietly that only Nia could hear. But Bradley Holt wasn't used to being ignored. He stood, and his crew stood with him, a coordinated movement that drew every eye in the cafeteria. The room didn't go quiet. That would have been too obvious, too dramatic. Instead, the volume shifted, conversations continuing, but attention redirecting everyone watching while pretending not to watch. Bradley and his friends approached the twins' table with the casual arrogance of people who'd never faced consequences. They didn't sit that would have implied equality. They stood forming a semicircle that blocked the twins from the rest of the cafeteria, creating a pocket of space where anything could happen outside the sightlines of supervising adults. "Hey there," Bradley said, his tone dripping with false friendliness. "I'm Bradley. This is Mason, Chelsea, Jake, and Connor. We like to personally welcome all new students to Riverside High." Naomi looked up, her dark eyes meeting his without flinching. "Thank you. We're fine." "Oh, I'm sure you are," Bradley continued, undeterred. "I just couldn't help but notice your lunch. That's so interesting, so cultural. What is that exactly?" "Food," Nia said flatly. Mason laughed, a sharp bark of sound. "She's funny, I like that. No, seriously though, what is it? It smells really strong. Exotic." Chelsea added, wrinkling her nose in a way that was supposed to look cute, but came across as cruel. My mom went to Africa once. Is it African food? We're from Atlanta, Naomi said, her voice still calm, still controlled. Born and raised. Oh, so you're American, Bradley said, as if this were a revelation. I just assumed, with the hair and everything. His hand reached out, fingers moving toward Naomi's braids. In a fraction of a second, Nia's hand shot up, intercepting his wrist mid-air. The movement was so fast, so precise, that Bradley didn't even see it coming. One moment his hand was moving toward her sister's head. The next it was caught in an iron grip that was somehow gentle and absolutely firm at the same time. Don't touch her hair, Nia said quietly. The cafeteria's background noise seemed to drop several decibels. Bradley stared at his captured wrist, then at Nia's face, shock and anger warring across his features. Nobody touched Bradley Holt. Nobody stopped Bradley Holt. Nobody said no to Bradley Holt. Whoa, whoa. Mason stepped forward, his voice taking on a threatening edge. That's not cool. He was just being friendly. Nia released Bradley's wrist, but didn't break eye contact. Touching someone's hair without permission isn't friendly. It's disrespectful. For a long moment, the standoff held. Bradley rubbed his wrist, his face flushing red, whether from embarrassment or anger was hard to tell. Around the cafeteria, phones had appeared, small rectangles of potential viral moments held by students who smelled drama the way sharks smell blood in water. Then Bradley laughed, a sound designed to reclaim power through mockery. Wow, sensitive much. I was literally just trying to be nice. But I guess some people bring their attitudes with them wherever they go. Attitudes, Chelsea echoed, nodding sagely, as if Bradley had just said something profound. Jake picked up one of the plantains from Nia's lunchbox, holding it up like a foreign artifact. Is this a banana? Why is it brown? Did it go bad? Put it back, Naomi said, her voice still soft, but with an edge that could cut diamond. Jake looked at Bradley, who shrugged with exaggerated nonchalance. Then, with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth, Jake took a bite of the plantain. He chewed for a moment, his face contorting in exaggerated disgust. Oh my God, that's disgusting. He spit the piece into a napkin. How do you eat this? Carefully. Nia said, her hand still clenched beneath the table. With manners your mother apparently forgot to teach you. The insult landed like a slap. Jake's face went scarlet. Mason stepped closer, his bulk meant to intimidate. What did you just say? You heard her, Naomi said, finally setting down her fork. Both twins were sitting perfectly still now, their posture relaxed, but ready like coiled springs waiting for the right moment to release. Bradley held up a hand, playing the role of peacemaker, even as his eyes glittered with malice. Hey, let's all calm down. No need for this to get ugly. We're all friends here, right? We're all Riverside Hawks. He picked up Nia's thermos of ginger tea, unscrewing the cap and sniffing it dramatically. What's this smells like? My grandmother's medicine cabinet. It's tea, Nia said through gritted teeth. Tea, Bradley announced to his friends. Isn't that precious? They brought tea to school. Before anyone could stop him, Bradley tipped the thermos, pouring the contents across the twins' table. The amber liquid spread across the surface, soaking their lunchboxes, their homework, their carefully packed meal that represented their mother's love in Tupperware form. The cafeteria gasped. Naomi and Nia sat perfectly still, watching the tea drip onto their laps, onto the floor, onto everything their mother had worked so hard to provide. Oops, Bradley said, his voice full of mock concern. I'm so sorry. That was an accident. You saw that, right, everyone? Total accident. Around them, his friends nodded enthusiastically. Chelsea already had her phone out, recording, creating a narrative where Bradley was the victim of a tragic mishap, rather than the architect of deliberate cruelty. "Maybe you should go clean up in the bathroom," Bradley suggested, stepping back with his hands raised in false innocence. "We wouldn't want you sitting in tea-soaked clothes all day. That would be so embarrassing." Beneath the table, both twins' hands were fists, now knuckles white with the effort of restraint. Every muscle in their bodies wanted to move to strike, to show these privileged bullies exactly what happened when you pushed too far. But their father's voice echoed in their minds. "We fight only to stop pain, not to spread it. Violence in anger is chaos. Violence in defense is justice. Know the difference and you'll never throw a punch you regret." Slowly, deliberately, Naomi and Nia stood. Tea dripped from their skirts. Their homework was ruined, their lunch. The lunch their mother had woken up early to prepare was destroyed. They gathered their soaked belongings in silence, their movements synchronized from years of training together, years of being sisters first and individuals second. "What no comeback?" Mason taunted. "No attitude now." Nia paused, turning to look at him, with eyes so calm, so utterly controlled, that he actually took a step back. "We don't need comebacks," she said quietly. "We just need to remember your faces." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The twins walked out of the cafeteria with their heads high, their backs straight, their dignity intact, even as tea left a trail of droplets behind them. Behind them, Bradley's table erupted in laughter and high fives, celebrating a victory they didn't yet understand they'd actually just lost. But not everyone was laughing. In the corner of the cafeteria, sitting alone at a table near the emergency exit, Ethan Morrison watched the whole scene unfold. His phone was in his hand, capturing every moment from an angle that showed exactly what happened. He'd been documenting Bradley's behavior for months, collecting evidence that nobody seemed to want to see. He saved the video with shaking hands and titled it, "Cafeteria Incident Sept 12 Move." Near the faculty table, Ms. Patricia Hernandez, the junior English teacher, had also witnessed everything. She stood her mouth opening to intervene, to finally do something about Bradley Holt's reign of terror. But then she caught sight of Principal Morrison's office through the cafeteria windows. Inside, she could see Bradley's father, Richard Holt, major donor board member, the man who'd funded the new library wing and the STEM lab, and who made it very clear that his generosity came with expectations. Ms. Hernandez sat back down, her intervention dying in her throat. She hated herself for it. But she had student loans, a mortgage, a career that could end with one phone call from the right wealthy parent. So she looked away. And in that moment of cowardice, she became complicit. That evening, in apartment 4B of the Meadowview complex, a place that had neither meadows nor views, Naomi and Nia Walker changed out of their tea-stained uniforms and into the loose cotton pants and tank tops they wore for training. Their mother, Grace Walker, wouldn't be home for another 3 hours. She was pulling a double shift at the hospital, trying to save enough for Christmas presents that her daughters had already told her they didn't need. The apartment was small. Living room kitchenette, one bedroom that the twins shared, and a bathroom where the shower only worked if you held the handle at exactly the right angle. But it was clean, filled with the smell of the lemongrass candles their mother burned to mask the mildew, and decorated with photos of better times, their father in his karate gi grinning as he held up a trophy. Family vacations to beaches they could no longer afford. The twins as toddlers, already inseparable. The girls moved the coffee table to the side, creating a small practice space in front of the television that they never turned on because cable was an expense they couldn't justify. "Ready?" Naomi asked, settling into her stance. "Always," Nia replied. They began with kata, the formal exercises their father had taught them, since they were 6 years old. Heian Shoden. The first form its movements as familiar as breathing. Their bodies moved in perfect synchronization, each block, each punch, each step a meditation in motion. Step forward, downward block. Punch middle level. Turn reverse punch. Front kick land in front stance. Their father's voice guided them from memory. Karate is not about fighting. It's about discipline, control, understanding that the strongest person in the room is the one who doesn't need to prove it. They moved through the katas methodically, heian, nidan, heian, sandan, each one more complex than the last. Sweat beaded on their foreheads. Their breathing synchronized their movements, a conversation without words. After an hour, they paused, both breathing hard but controlled. "We could have stopped him," Nia said quietly, breaking the meditative silence. "In the cafeteria. We could have shown him exactly what happens when you push us too far." "And then what?" Naomi asked, toweling sweat from her neck. "We get expelled, arrested, prove every stereotype they already believe about us. So we just take it, let them humiliate us." Naomi turned to her sister, her eyes soft with understanding. They were identical in almost every way, same face, same build, same fierce intelligence. But Naomi had their father's patience while Nia had their mother's fire, and together they balanced each other. "We don't take it," Naomi said carefully. "We just choose our moment. Dad used to say that the amateur throws the first punch. The professional throws the last one. We're not amateurs, Nia." Nia was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "I wanted to break his wrist when he reached for your hair." "I know. I felt it through you." Twin things. They'd always had it the ability to sense each other's emotions, to know what the other was thinking before words were spoken. Their father said it made them formidable training partners. Their mother said it made them impossible to lie to. They continued training until the sky outside their small window faded from blue to purple to black. By the time their mother's key turned in the lock at 10:47 p.m., they'd showered, changed, and were sitting at the small kitchen table pretending to do homework. Grace Walker looked exhausted. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her hair escaping from its bun, her eyes carrying the weight of 12 hours on her feet. But when she saw her daughters, her whole face transformed with a smile that made her look 10 years younger. "My babies," she said, dropping her bag and gathering them both into her arms. She smelled like hospital soap and the lavender lotion she kept in her locker. "How was the first day?" The twins exchanged a glance, a whole conversation in a fraction of a second. "Good," Naomi said. "Fine," Nia added. Their mother pulled back, her eyes narrowing. She might have been exhausted, but she wasn't blind. Naomi Grace Walker, Nia Faith Walker. The truth. Now. Another glance. Another silent conversation. "It was an adjustment," Naomi said carefully. "Some kids were rude," Nia added. Their mother's jaw tightened. She'd fought so hard to get them into Riverside High, believing that a better school meant better opportunities, a path their father would have wanted for them. But she also knew what it meant to be different in a place that valued sameness. "How rude?" she asked quietly. "They made fun of our lunch," Naomi said. "Said it smelled weird. Touched my hair without permission," Nia added. "Spilled tea on us." Their mother's hands curled into fists, and for a moment the twins saw where they got their fire from. "Did you defend yourselves?" Grace asked. "Yes," Naomi said, "with silence and dignity." Their mother nodded slowly, then pulled them close again. "Good. That's good. Your father would be proud." Her voice cracked slightly on the word father, the way it always did. But remember, you defend yourselves however you need to. Dignity is important, but so is safety. If anyone ever makes you feel unsafe. We know, Mama, Nia said softly. We know. That night, long after their mother had fallen asleep in the small bedroom they all shared, Grace, in the double bed, the twins on sleeping bags on the floor, because they'd sold the bunk beds to help make rent, Naomi and Nia lay awake in the darkness. Tomorrow will be worse, Nia whispered. I know, Naomi replied. They'll push harder, try to get a reaction. Let them. And if they put their hands on us again? Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then we remind them why our father taught us control. Not so we'd never fight, but so when we did, we'd know exactly how much force was necessary. No more, no less. In the darkness, Nia smiled. How much force do you think Bradley Holt's ego can handle? Let's hope we never have to find out. But they both knew they probably would. Across town, in a house with more bathrooms than the Walker apartment, had rooms Bradley Holt lay in his king-sized bed, scrolling through his phone. The video Chelsea had posted was already getting likes, shares, comments full of laughing emojis and fire symbols. Bet they won't come back tomorrow, Mason had texted. And if they do, Bradley had replied, then we make them wish they hadn't. Bradley fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of tomorrow's humiliation, completely unaware that the quiet twins in the cafeteria corner were a storm he'd been foolish enough to provoke. And storms, once started, don't stop until they've run their course. The morning sun filtered through the Venetian blinds of apartment 4B, exactly the way it always did, in harsh stripes that cut across the sleeping bags, where Naomi and Nia had already woken, already begun their day. They moved through their morning routine in practiced silence, careful not to wake their mother, who had only gotten 4 hours of sleep before her morning shift at the hospital started. Naomi braided Nia's hair. Nia braided Naomi's. Their fingers worked with the muscle memory of 1,000 mornings before this one, weaving cornrows that would last the week, each braid a small act of love and protection. You think they'll try again today? Nia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I know they will, Naomi replied, her fingers never pausing in their work. People like Bradley Holt don't stop until they get the reaction they want. Then we don't give it to them. Exactly. But both twins knew that maintaining control got harder each time. Every insult was a test of their father's training, every cruel word a challenge to the discipline they'd spent years cultivating. There was a limit to how much anyone could take, even them. They dressed in their backup uniforms, the ones they'd hand-washed in the bathroom sink the night before, because the laundromat cost money they needed for other things. The skirts were slightly wrinkled, the white shirts not quite as crisp as they should be, but they were clean. Their mother had taught them that dignity wasn't about having the best things. It was about taking care of what you had. On the small kitchen table, they found breakfast their mother had left: oatmeal in 2 bowls, covered with plates to keep warm, sliced bananas arranged on top in the shape of smiles, and a note written on the back of a hospital cafeteria napkin. Make today your masterpiece. Love always, Mama. Nia traced the words with her finger, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. She shouldn't have to work this hard. I know, Naomi said softly. But that's exactly why we can't let them win. We succeed here, we get scholarships, we go to college, we change everything for her. That's the plan. The plan? Nia echoed, though her voice carried doubt like a weight. They ate their breakfast in silence, washed the dishes, locked the apartment, and walked the 6 blocks to the bus stop, where the city bus would take them to the edge of Riverside High's territory, the invisible border where city kids gave way to suburban privilege. The school looked different in the morning light, less like a fortress, and more like a gauntlet they'd have to run. Students poured through the gates in clusters, designer backpacks slung over shoulders, conversations about weekend plans and upcoming parties, creating a symphony of belonging that the twins could hear but never quite join. As they walked through the front entrance, heads turned. Whispers followed them like shadows. That's them. The ones from yesterday. I saw the video. Did you see how she grabbed Bradley's wrist so aggressive? My mom said they should be expelled for threatening him. The narrative had already been written, edited, and distributed. In the 12 hours since the cafeteria incident, Bradley's version of events had taken root in the soil of Riverside High's social ecosystem, growing into a story where he was the victim and the twins were the aggressors. Chelsea's carefully edited video had been shared hundreds of times, stripped of context, showing only Nia's hand catching Bradley's wrist and cutting to his shocked expression, a masterpiece of manipulation that would make any propaganda minister proud. First period was American history with Mr. Patterson, a man whose tweed jackets smelled like mothballs and whose understanding of the civil rights movement seemed to come entirely from a single documentary he'd watched in 1987. The twins took seats in the back, hoping for invisibility. They didn't get it. "Ah, our new students," Mr. Patterson said, with the kind of forced enthusiasm teachers used when they were about to say something they thought was inclusive, but was actually offensive. Naomi and Nia correct. Perhaps you can offer us a unique perspective on today's lesson about the Montgomery bus boycott. Naomi's pen stopped mid-note. We're from Atlanta, Mr. Patterson, not Alabama in 1955. Yes, of course, he stammered, his face reddening. I just thought, cultural background, family stories, perhaps. Our family stories involve our father teaching us martial arts in our garage, Nia said flatly. Would you like to hear about proper stance and breathing techniques? Scattered laughter rippled through the classroom. Bradley, sitting 3 rows ahead, turned to look at them with narrowed eyes. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. They were supposed to be quiet, intimidated, broken. The class moved on, but the damage was done. Mr. Patterson called on them 3 more times, always prefacing his questions with, "From your perspective," or "In your experience," as if they were anthropological specimens, rather than students studying the same textbook as everyone else. When the bell rang, the twins gathered their books quickly, hoping to escape before, "Hey, wait up." Bradley's voice cut through their exit strategy like a knife through silk. They turned slowly, deliberately. Bradley stood with his usual crewmason's bulk blocking one side of the hallway. Chelsea's phone already out, and recording Jake and Connor forming a wall of preppy menace in their matching polo shirts. We didn't get to properly finish our conversation yesterday, Bradley said, his tone friendly in that dangerous way that signaled cruelty wearing a mask. I felt bad about the whole tea thing. Total accident, you know. We know exactly what it was, Naomi said evenly. Whoa, hostile much? Mason stepped forward, his presence meant to intimidate with size alone. Bradley's trying to apologize and you're being rude again. See, Chelsea? This is what I was talking about. Chelsea nodded her phone, capturing every moment. It's like they want to be victims or something. Bradley's being so nice. Bradley held up his hands in mock surrender. Look, I get it. New school probably feeling defensive, but here's the thing about Riverside, we're a family here, and family looks out for each other, so I'm willing to let yesterday go if you are. He extended his hand toward Naomi, a peace offering that smelled like a trap. Nia shifted slightly, her body language readable only to her sister, a subtle weight transfer that said, "Don't trust this." Naomi didn't take his hand. We appreciate the gesture, but we're going to be late for second period. See, that's the problem right there, Bradley said, dropping his hand, but not his smile. You're not being a team player. You're not embracing the Riverside spirit. Makes me think you don't actually want to be here. What we want, Naya said carefully, is to get an education without being harassed. Harassed? Bradley laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Who's harassing you? I'm trying to be friends. Tell me what part of friendship feels like harassment to you. A small crowd had gathered, now students forming a loose circle around the confrontation phones, out hungry for drama that would fuel their group chats and social media feeds for the next 24 hours. The part where you dumped tea on us, Naomi said quietly. The part where you mocked our food. The part where you tried to touch my hair without permission. Allegedly, Chelsea interjected, her voice sing-song. You allegedly claim these things happened, but the video shows you getting aggressive with Bradley when he was just being welcoming. The video shows what you wanted it to show, Nia countered. Mason's face twisted into something ugly. You calling Chelsea a liar? I'm saying a video that starts mid-conversation doesn't tell the whole story. And I'm saying, Bradley cut in, his voice hardening, that you two need to learn how Riverside High works. See, here's the thing about our school. It runs on respect. Mutual respect. You respect us. We respect you. But if you come in here with attitudes, making accusations, being aggressive, well, that makes things difficult for everyone. The threat was clear, even wrapped in diplomatic language. Naomi and Naya stood perfectly still, their training kicking in their bodies, relaxed, but ready, their minds calculating distances, angles, exit routes. We have to get to class, Naomi said, moving to step around Bradley. He shifted, blocking her path. In a minute. I'm not done talking. But we're done listening, Nia said. For a fraction of a second, Bradley's mask slipped. His face contorted with genuine anger, the kind that came from a lifetime of never being told no, never being denied, never being challenged. His hand shot out faster than before, reaching for Naomi's backpack strap. Naomi sidestepped smoothly, the movement so subtle that to an observer, it looked like Bradley had simply missed. But those who trained, those who understood body mechanics would recognize it for what it was: perfect evasion, minimal effort, maximum effect. Bradley stumbled slightly, his own momentum carrying him forward into empty air. Laughter erupted from the gathered crowd, not at the twins this time, but at Bradley's momentary loss of composure. His face went scarlet. You think this is funny? He snarled, abandoning all pretense of friendliness. You think you can make a fool out of me in my own school? Nobody's making a fool of you, Naomi said calmly. You're doing that yourself. It was the wrong thing to say, or perhaps exactly the right thing, depending on perspective. Bradley's eyes went flat, cold, calculating. He smiled, but it was a smile that promised consequences. You know what? He said, his voice dropping to a register that made several students lean in to hear. I tried. I really did. Tried to welcome you, tried to make peace, tried to be the bigger person. But some people don't want peace. Some people bring their drama, their problems, their attitude wherever they go. And Riverside High doesn't need that kind of negativity. He turned to address the crowd, playing to his audience like a politician at a rally. I think we should let the administration know that these two are creating a hostile environment, threatening students, making false accusations, refusing to integrate into our community values. Don't you think that's fair? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Chelsea's phone captured it all, the perfect setup for a narrative where Bradley was the reasonable one and the twins were troublemakers who refused to assimilate. The bell rang for second period, shrill and insistent. We'll continue this conversation later. Bradley promised, his smile returning. Much later. The crowd dispersed, slowly, reluctantly, students throwing glances back over their shoulders as they headed to their classes. The twins stood alone in the hallway, surrounded by the echoes of judgment and the weight of knowing that this was only the beginning. "He's planning something," Naya said quietly once they were alone. "I know. Something worse than tea. I know. And we're going to let him—" Naomi turned to her sister, her dark eyes carrying a determination that was equal parts their father's discipline and their mother's fierce love. "We're going to let him try, and when he does, we're going to make sure everyone sees exactly who he really is. Not through violence, through truth. And if truth isn't enough, then we show them what Dad taught us about defense. But only defense, Nia. Only what's necessary to protect ourselves. Nothing more." They were late to second period. The teacher, Mrs. Chen, gave them a disapproving look, but said nothing, pointing to empty seats near the back. As they settled in, Naomi noticed something, a folded piece of paper on her desk placed there by someone before they arrived. She opened it carefully, conscious of Nia's curious gaze over her shoulder. The note was written in careful block letters. "They're planning something for lunch. Be ready, a friend." Naomi folded the note back up and slipped it into her pocket. Around the classroom, students whispered and glanced their way, the morning's confrontation already legendary in the way that high school drama becomes legendary. The hours crawled toward lunch with the inevitability of a train approaching a collapsed bridge. Third period, physics passed in a blur of equations that Naomi solved mechanically, her mind elsewhere. Fourth period, Spanish, was worse. Senora Rodriguez asked her to pronounce words with proper accent 3 times, as if being black somehow meant she couldn't roll her R's like everyone else in the class. When the lunch bell finally rang, the twins gathered their things with deliberate slowness, letting the rush of students clear the hallways before they made their way to the cafeteria. "We could skip lunch," Nia suggested. "Go to the library. And let them think they won, that they scared us away." Naomi shook her head. "No, we face it, whatever it is." The cafeteria was already full when they arrived, the usual tribes at their usual tables, the social ecosystem of Riverside High on full display. But something was different today. The energy in the room was charged, expectant, like the air before a thunderstorm. Bradley's table was front and center, and he'd been joined by additional allies. More athletes, more popular kids, a coalition of the privileged rallying around their de facto leader. The twins bought their lunch today. They'd brought sandwiches from home, simple PB&J that couldn't be mocked for being exotic, and headed toward their corner table. They never made it. "Well, well, well," Bradley's voice boomed across the cafeteria, amplified by the acoustics and his own sense of dramatic timing. "Look who decided to show up. The twins who think they're too good for Riverside High." Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned. The cafeteria held its collective breath. Naomi and Nia kept walking, their faces neutral, their steps measured. "I'm talking to you," Bradley said, standing now, his crew rising with him like a choreographed dance of intimidation. The twins stopped, turning slowly to face him. Around the cafeteria, phones rose like a crop of digital flowers blooming toward the sun, everyone eager to capture whatever was about to happen. "We heard you," Naomi said calmly. "We just didn't think you had anything worth hearing." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "You didn't talk to Bradley Holt like that. You didn't challenge him. Not unless you wanted war." Bradley's smile was all predator, now no pretense of humanity left in it. "You know what I think? I think you two need to learn some respect. I think you need to understand how things work here." He picked up his lunch tray. Today's special was spaghetti with meat sauce, a pile of pasta swimming in red sauce that looked like blood in the fluorescent lights. I think, he continued walking toward them with his tray held out like an offering to angry gods, you need a lesson in Riverside values. Nia's hand found Naomi's, a quick squeeze that communicated everything. Stay calm, stay ready, remember everything Dad taught us. Bradley stopped 3 feet away from them, close enough that they could smell his expensive cologne, close enough that his tray was well within range of both twins. You see, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent cafeteria. At Riverside, we don't tolerate threats. We don't tolerate attitude. And we certainly don't tolerate people who think they can come in here and disrespect our traditions, our students, our way of life. All we want is to eat lunch and go to class, Naomi said, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline she could feel coursing through her veins. Too late for that, Bradley said. And then, with theatrical slowness, he tipped his tray forward. The spaghetti and sauce cascaded through the air in what felt like slow motion, arcing toward the twins, in a mess of pasta and humiliation, designed to break them, to make them react, to give Bradley the viral moment he needed to paint them as violent, aggressive everything he'd been saying they were. But Naomi and Nia Walker had spent years training for moments that required split-second decisions, perfect control, and absolute precision. They moved. Nia stepped left, Naomi stepped right, both of them creating a space between their bodies that the spaghetti fell through, harmlessly splattering on the floor behind them in a pattern that looked almost artistic. The cafeteria erupted in shocked exclamations. Bradley stood there, his empty tray still extended, his mouth open in disbelief. He'd expected tears, anger, retaliation, anything but the calm, synchronized evasion that had just made his grand gesture look foolish. Oops, Naomi said, her voice carrying that same mock concern Bradley had used when he'd spilled their tea. Looks like you missed. That was an accident, right? Everyone saw that was an accident. Laughter erupted, but this time it was directed at Bradley. Students who'd been afraid to challenge him suddenly found courage in the twins' perfect composure, in the way they'd turned his weapon into a joke. Bradley's face went from red to purple. You bitch. The word hung in the air like poison gas. There it is, Nia said quietly. The real you. No more pretending to be nice. No more fake apologies. Just hate. Mason stepped forward, his fists clenched. You can't talk to him like that. He just tried to assault us with Italian food, Naomi pointed out. I think we can talk to him however we want. It was an accident, Chelsea shrieked, her phone shaking in her hand as she tried to capture everything. You made him drop it. You provoked him. By standing here, by existing. Nia's voice rose slightly, the first crack in her armor. By being black in your precious white school. The word black seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the cafeteria. It was the thing everyone had been thinking, but nobody had been saying. The subtext made text, the quiet part said loud. This isn't about race, Bradley said, but his voice lacked conviction. This is about respect. This is about you two thinking you're better than everyone else. No, Naomi said, stepping forward now, her fear transforming into something harder, sharper. This is about you being upset, that we won't bow down, that we won't be quiet, that we won't let you make us feel small so you can feel big. Bradley's hand shot out, not toward their hair this time, not toward their bags, toward Naomi's shoulder, a push designed to knock her off balance, to escalate, to create the physical confrontation he needed to play victim. His palm connected with Naomi's shoulder, and that's when everything changed. Naomi moved with the push, rather than against it, a basic principle of Aikido their father had drilled into them 1,000 times. She rotated her body using Bradley's own force and momentum, adding just enough of her own energy to send him stumbling forward off balance arms, windmilling as he tried to catch himself. He crashed into Mason, and both of them went down in a tangle of limbs and wounded pride. The cafeteria exploded. Students screamed, jumped back, phones captured every angle, as Bradley Holt, untouchable, powerful, privileged, Bradley Holt lay on the floor among the spaghetti he'd tried to use as a weapon. "She attacked him!" Chelsea screamed. "Everyone saw it! She attacked Bradley!" But before anyone could move, before the narrative could be written, Nia's voice cut through the chaos. He pushed her first. Everyone with a phone saw it. He put his hands on her first. Mason scrambled to his feet, pulling Bradley up with him. Bradley's face was a mask of pure rage, now all pretense abandoned. "You're dead," he hissed. "Both of you. You're fucking dead." "Enough!" The voice cracked through the cafeteria like a whip. Principal Morrison stood in the doorway, his face red with fury, his suit rumpled as if he'd run from his office. Behind him stood 2 security guards, and Ms. Hernandez, the English teacher who'd watched and done nothing the day before. "My office," Principal Morrison barked. "All of you, now!" The twins stood their ground, their hands at their sides, their breathing controlled despite their racing hearts. Bradley pointed at them dramatically. "They attacked me. These 2 attacked me for no reason. I want them arrested. I said my office," the principal repeated. "Now!" As they filed out of the cafeteria, Naomi caught sight of something that made her pause. Ethan Morrison sitting in his usual corner spot, his phone in his hand, his expression unreadable. For just a moment their eyes met. He gave the slightest nod, then looked back down at his phone, his thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. The walk to the principal's office felt like a funeral march. Students lined the hallways, phones, out whispers following like ghosts. Bradley walked ahead with his crew already crafting his version of events, his voice carrying back to where the twins walked with Ms. Hernandez. "You saw it right, Ms. H," Bradley was saying. "They attacked me, completely unprovoked. I was just trying to have a conversation and they went psycho." Principal Morrison's office was large and intimidating, filled with leather furniture and walls covered in photos of himself with various wealthy donors and politicians. He settled behind his massive desk like a judge preparing to pass sentence. "Sit," he commanded. The twins sat in the 2 chairs facing his desk. Bradley and his crew remained standing behind them, a physical power play designed to keep them feeling surrounded, outnumbered, defeated. "I'm going to make this very simple," Principal Morrison began, steepling his fingers. "Riverside High has a zero-tolerance policy for violence. Zero tolerance." "They started it," Nia began. "I wasn't talking to you," the principal cut her off. "You'll speak when spoken to." Naomi's hand found Nia's under the edge of the desk, holding tight. "Now," Principal Morrison continued, "I have multiple witnesses who say you 2 physically assaulted Bradley Holt in the cafeteria. That's a serious offense. Grounds for immediate expulsion and possible criminal charges." "That's not what happened," Naomi said carefully. "Bradley pushed me first. I defended myself." "She's lying," Mason burst out. "Bradley didn't touch her until after she attacked him." "There's video," Nia added. "Dozens of students were recording." Principal Morrison's expression flickered just for a second with something that might have been concern, but it passed quickly, replaced by the practiced neutrality of a man who'd learned to protect the institution above all else. "I'm aware of the videos," he said slowly. "I'm also aware that they show a very chaotic scene that could be interpreted in many different ways. What's not open to interpretation is that you 2 have been here less than 2 days and have already been involved in 2 separate altercations with other students." "Because we're being bullied," Nia's voice rose despite herself. Because Bradley and his friends have been harassing us since we got here yesterday. They dumped tea on us. They mocked our food. They tried to touch our hair. Alleged harassment, Principal Morrison interrupted. Allegations that, I might add, have no supporting evidence beyond your word against theirs. Bradley stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice had transformed into something almost wounded, vulnerable, a masterclass in manipulation. Principal Morrison, I tried to be welcoming to them. I really did. But they came in here with chips on their shoulders looking for problems. My father always says that some people bring their environments with them, and I think that's what we're seeing here. The implication was clear, ugly, designed to confirm every prejudice the principal might harbor about two black girls from the city invading his pristine suburban school. Naomi felt something crack inside her, not her composure, but something deeper. The hope that adults would do the right thing, that justice would prevail, that being right mattered more than being powerful. So that's it, she said quietly. He can do whatever he wants, say whatever he wants, because his father donates money to the school. Principal Morrison's face hardened. Young lady, you're very close to making this situation much worse for yourself. I suggest you watch your tone. Or what? Naya challenged. You'll expel us for defending ourselves, for standing up to bullies, for existing while black in your perfect white school. The silence that followed was deafening. I will not tolerate accusations of racism in this office, Principal Morrison said, his voice ice. Riverside High is an inclusive, diverse institution that welcomes students from all backgrounds. We're the only black students in our entire grade, Naomi pointed out. How diverse is that? The principal stood abruptly, his chair rolling back with the force. That's it. You're both suspended effective immediately. 3 days. You'll be escorted off campus and your mother will be notified. This is bullshit. Nia was on her feet now, too. Make it 5 days, the principal said coldly. Keep talking, and it becomes a week. Behind them, Bradley and his crew exchanged smiles, barely hidden behind hands pressed to mouths in fake concern. What about Bradley? Naomi asked, still seated, still controlled, even as everything fell apart. What's his punishment for pushing me, for harassment, for creating this whole situation? Bradley will receive a verbal warning for his role in the altercation. Principal Morrison said the words sounding rehearsed, like he'd prepared this response before they even walked into his office. But given his clean record and the unclear nature of the video evidence, I see no reason for further discipline. Of course you don't, Nia said bitterly. The security guards were called. The twins were escorted from the office through the hallways filled with staring students past their lockers, where someone had already scrawled "ghetto trash" in permanent marker out the front doors into the afternoon sun that felt too bright, too cheerful for the death of hope. They sat on the curb outside the school gates waiting for their mother, who would have to leave work early, who would lose hours she couldn't afford to lose, who had sacrificed so much to get them into this school, only to have them kicked out in less than 48 hours. We should have stayed in our old school, Naya said quietly, her voice thick with unshed tears. No, Naomi said firmly. We did nothing wrong. We defended ourselves. We told the truth. That's all we can do. And look where it got us. Before Naomi could respond, a car pulled up, not their mother's beat-up Honda, but a newer model sedan. The window rolled down, revealing Ethan Morrison, the quiet boy from the cafeteria corner. Get in, he said. The twins exchanged glances. Why would we do that? Nia asked suspiciously. Ethan held up his phone. Because I have the real video, all of it, from yesterday and today, every angle, everything they don't want anyone to see. And I know where we can upload it so the whole world can watch before they figure out how to take it down. Naomi stood slowly. Why are you helping us? Ethan's expression was grim, determined. Because Bradley Holt has been tormenting people at this school for years, Because I'm tired of watching and doing nothing. Because you two are the first people who've ever stood up to him and lived to tell about it." He paused. "And because I'm the principal's nephew, which means I know exactly where he keeps the records of all the complaints he's been burying to protect donors like Bradley's father." Naya stood too. "You'd go against your own uncle?" "He stopped being my uncle the day he chose money over what's right," Ethan said. "Are you getting in or not? Your mom's probably already on her way, and we don't have much time." The twins looked at each other, having a conversation in the space between heartbeats. Then they got in the car. Sometimes justice required more than silence and dignity. Sometimes it required evidence allies and the courage to fight back not with fists, but with truth. The real battle was just beginning. Ethan's car smelled like coffee and old textbooks, the back seat cluttered with debate team folders and a laptop bag that looked expensive enough to feed the Walker family for a month. He drove with the careful precision of someone who'd only had his license for a few months, checking his mirrors obsessively as he navigated away from Riverside High. "Where are we going?" Naomi asked from the passenger seat, while Naya sat in the back, her hand still clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. "Somewhere they won't think to look," Ethan replied, turning onto a side street that led away from the main road. "My uncle has eyes everywhere in this town. Half the cops play golf with Bradley's dad. We need to move fast and smart." He pulled into a small coffee shop called The Grind, tucked between a laundromat and a used bookstore in a part of town that wealthy Riverside residents pretended didn't exist. The kind of place where the furniture was mismatched and the art on the walls was actually made by local artists instead of purchased from corporate catalogs. Inside, Ethan led them to a corner booth far from the windows, setting his laptop on the scarred wooden table. His hands shook slightly as he opened it, pulling up folder after folder of video files, each one labeled with dates and locations. "I've been documenting Bradley for 2 years," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd carried a secret too heavy for too long. "Ever since he and his crew cornered me in the locker room freshman year and held my head in a toilet while they laughed and took pictures." Naya leaned forward, her eyes widening. "Did you report it?" Ethan's laugh was bitter hollow. "To who, my uncle?" "He called me into his office, told me boys will be boys, suggested I try out for football to toughen up. Said that Bradley's father had just pledged $100,000 for the new science wing, and it wouldn't look good if there were incidents involving his son." Naomi watched him with something like recognition, the understanding that came from knowing exactly what it felt like to be failed by the people who were supposed to protect you. "So you started recording?" "Everything?" Ethan confirmed, clicking through files. "Every insult, every shove, every cruel joke. I thought if I could just gather enough evidence, someone would have to listen. Someone would have to care." He looked up at them, his eyes red-rimmed. "But then I realized that people with power don't care about evidence. They care about protecting their power." He turned the laptop toward them. "Until now." The screen showed a video timeline, multiple clips from different angles. Ethan hit play on the first one, dated 3 months prior. It showed Bradley and his crew surrounding a smaller kid near the gym, their voices clear even through the phone's microphone. "Give us your lunch money scholarship, boy," Bradley's voice rang out. "Consider it a donation to people who actually belong here." The kid, barely 14, handed over crumpled bills with shaking hands. The video ended with Bradley and his friends laughing, counting the money like it was a game. "There are dozens like that," Ethan said, scrolling through more files. "But these are the ones that matter for you." He pulled up yesterday's cafeteria incident, but this version was different from Chelsea's edited masterpiece. This showed the full context: Bradley approaching their table, the cruel comments about their food, the deliberate spilling of the tea, all while the twins sat completely still, not engaging, not reacting. "Chelsea's version cuts all of this out," Ethan explained. "She made it look like you were the aggressors. But this shows the truth." Then came today's footage. Ethan had multiple angles, including one that showed Bradley's hand making contact with Naomi's shoulder, first the clear push that preceded her defensive movement. In slow motion, it was obvious she hadn't attacked. She'd redirected using his own force against him exactly as her father had taught her. "This is solid evidence," Naomi said, hope flickering in her chest like a candle in the wind. "This proves we were defending ourselves." "It proves more than that," Ethan said grimly. He pulled up another folder, this one full of PDF documents. "These are complaint reports I copied from my uncle's computer. Parents, teachers, students, all reporting Bradley's behavior over the past 3 years. And look." He pointed to the status column on each report. Every single one read, "Resolved, no action taken," or "Unfounded, closed." "Your uncle buried all of these?" Naya asked, her voice sharp with anger. "Not just buried, destroyed. These are just the digital copies I managed to save before he deleted them from the system. The paper files are all gone shredded, probably." Ethan's face twisted with disgust. "All because Bradley's father keeps writing checks. The new library wing Bradley harassment payoff. The STEM lab, another check to make another complaint disappear. The school is literally built on his family's money, and my uncle's willingness to look the other way." Naomi's mind raced, pieces falling into place. "So what's the plan? We can't just post these videos online. They'll claim they're fake or taken out of context, or they'll sue us for defamation," Nia finished. "Bradley's dad is a lawyer. He'll bury us in legal fees we can't afford." "That's why we don't just post them," Ethan said, a spark of something fierce lighting in his eyes. "We send them to people who can't ignore them, local news stations, the school board members who aren't in Bradley's father's pocket, and yes, there are a few. The district superintendent, maybe even the state education department." He pulled out a USB drive from his bag. "I've already compiled everything. Every video, every buried complaint, every piece of evidence that shows a pattern of harassment and administrative cover-up. This isn't just about you two anymore. This is about every kid Bradley has hurt, every parent whose concerns were dismissed, every teacher who was too scared to speak up." "You'd risk your relationship with your uncle for this?" Naomi asked quietly. Ethan met her gaze steadily. "My uncle made his choice. He chose money and reputation over doing what's right, over protecting students, over me." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm choosing differently." The coffee shop door chimed, and all three of them tensed. But it was just a college student with headphones in, oblivious to the revolution being planned in the corner booth. Nia pulled out her phone, checking the time. "Mom's going to be at the school in 20 minutes. When she finds out we're not there." "Call her," Naomi said. "Tell her everything. She deserves to know what we're planning." The call connected after 3 rings. Grace Walker's voice came through tight with worry and barely contained fury. "Nia, the school called me. They said you were suspended. What happened?" Nia put the phone on speaker, setting it in the middle of the table. "Mama, we're okay. We're safe. But we need to tell you something. And you need to listen to all of it before you say anything." For the next 10 minutes, they laid it all out. The harassment, the tea incident, today's confrontation, the suspension, and now Ethan's evidence. Grace listened in silence, though they could hear her breathing change, could imagine her face shifting through shock, anger, fear, and finally settling into the steel determination that had carried her through their father's death, and every hardship since. When they finished, there was a long pause. Then, "Where are you right now?" "The grind on Morrison Street," Naomi answered. "I know it. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't move, don't talk to anyone, and don't do anything with that evidence until I get there." "Mama, 15 minutes, Naomi Grace. I mean it." The line went dead. They waited in tense silence. Ethan nervously sipping a coffee he'd ordered more for camouflage than caffeine, the twins sharing a bottle of water they couldn't really afford but bought anyway to justify taking up space in the booth. "Are you scared?" Nia asked Ethan quietly. He considered the question, then nodded. "Terrified. But I'm more scared of what happens if we do nothing. If we let this keep going, Bradley will graduate, go to some Ivy League school his father bought his way into, and become exactly like his dad, someone who uses money and power to hurt people and get away with it. And the next Bradley will come along, and the cycle will continue." "Our dad used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear," Naomi said softly. "It's acting in spite of it." "Your dad sounds like he was a good man." "The best," the twins said in unison, then shared a sad smile. Grace Walker arrived in exactly 14 minutes, bursting through the coffee shop door with the force of a summer storm. She wore her hospital scrubs, her name tag still pinned to her chest, her hair escaping from its bun. She looked exhausted, furious, and absolutely formidable. She pulled both twins into a fierce hug, then held them at arm's length, examining them for injuries. "You're okay, both of you." "We're fine, Mama," Naomi assured her. Grace's eyes found Ethan assessing him in the way only mothers can, seeing everything in a single glance. "You're the one with the evidence." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said, sitting up straighter under her gaze. "Show me." They went through it all again, every video, every document, every piece of evidence that painted a picture of systematic harassment and institutional corruption. Grace watched it all with a face carved from stone, her jaw clenched so tight they could see the muscles working. When it was over, she sat back, her eyes closed for a moment. When she opened them, there was something new there, not just anger, but strategy. "I work at County General," she said quietly. "We have a patient, Mrs. Rebecca Chen. She's a reporter for Channel 7 News recovering from surgery. I've been her nurse for the past week. She's good ethical, and she hates stories about wealthy people abusing power." "You think she'd run this?" Ethan asked, hope and fear warring in his voice. "I think she'd fight her own editor to run this," Grace said. "But we need to be smart. Once this goes public, there's no taking it back. Bradley's father will come after you." She looked at Ethan. "And he'll come after us." She looked at her daughters. "Legal threats, intimidation, probably try to destroy our reputations." "Let him try," Naya said fiercely. "Baby, I know you're angry. I'm angry too. Angrier than I've been since your father died. But anger without strategy is just noise. We need to think this through." Naomi leaned forward, her mind working through the angles. "What if we don't just go to the news? What if we also file a formal complaint with the school board, force them to investigate? They'll protect their own," Grace said. "Principal Morris and Bradley's father, they all run in the same circles." "Not all of them," Ethan interjected. "There are 3 board members who've been trying to reform the district for years. Dr. Patel, she's a professor at the university. Mr. Washington, he's a community organizer. And Miss Rodriguez—" "Wait, Rodriguez," Nia interrupted. "Like our Spanish teacher, Senora Rodriguez." "Her mother," Ethan confirmed. "She's been on the board for 10 years and she's fought against the donor influence the whole time. If we can get the evidence to them before it goes public, they might be able to force an emergency board meeting." Grace pulled out her phone, her fingers moving rapidly across the screen. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. Ethan, you're going to make multiple copies of everything. Not just one USB drive, at least 5. We distribute them to different people, so if one gets compromised, we have backups." "On it," Ethan said, already pulling out additional drives from his bag. "Naomi, Nia, you're going to write down everything that happened, every detail, every witness, every moment. We need a clear timeline that matches the video evidence." The twins nodded, pulling out notebooks. "And I'm going to call Mrs. Chen, feel her out, see if she's interested in the story. If she is, we move fast before the school can spin this their way. For the next 2 hours, the corner booth of The Grind became a war room. Ethan copied files and organized evidence. The twins wrote their statements cross-referencing each other's memories to ensure accuracy. Grace made quiet phone calls, her voice steady and persuasive, as she laid groundwork with the reporter. Other customers came and went, oblivious to the fact that 4 people in a corner booth were building a case that would shake Riverside High to its foundations. Grace's phone rang. She looked at the screen, and her expression tightened. "It's the school, Principal Morrison." "Don't answer it," Ethan said quickly. "They're probably trying to control the narrative, make sure we stay quiet." Grace let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. She read it aloud. "Mrs. Walker, we need to discuss your daughter's suspension and potential path forward. Please call at your earliest convenience. Principal Morrison." "Path forward?" Naya said bitterly. "Like they're doing us a favor." Grace's phone rang again, a different number this time. She answered, her voice cautious. "Hello. Yes, this is Grace Walker. Oh, Mrs. Chen, thank you for calling back." The twins and Ethan fell silent, watching Grace's face as she spoke with the reporter. Her expression shifted from cautious to hopeful to determined. "Yes, we have video evidence. Multiple angles. Yes, documentation of previous incidents that were covered up. Tonight. That's very fast, but yes, I understand. Okay. The address is..." She looked at Ethan, who quickly scribbled down his address and showed it to her. 425 Oak Street, 7 o'clock. "Yes, we'll have everything ready. Thank you, Mrs. Chen." "Thank you." She hung up and looked at the 3 teenagers with something like pride mixed with fear. "She's coming to Ethan's house tonight with a camera crew. She wants to interview all of us, review the evidence, and if it's as strong as I told her, she's running the story tomorrow night." "Tomorrow?" Ethan's voice cracked. That's really fast." "And news fast is good," Grace said. "It means less time for the other side to prepare, less time to intimidate witnesses or bury evidence." "What about the school board members?" Naomi asked. "We send them the evidence tonight after Mrs. Chen has seen it. That way, if the school tries to claim the news story is false or exaggerated, the board will already have proof." It was a solid plan, maybe even a good plan. But as they gathered their things and prepared to head to Ethan's house, Nia felt a knot of worry in her stomach. What if it's not enough? What if people see the videos and still side with Bradley? What if money wins anyway? Grace cupped her daughter's face in her hands, the same hands that had braided her hair that morning, that had packed her lunch, that had worked 3 jobs to give her opportunities. "Then at least we fought. At least we stood up. At least we didn't let them silence us." Her voice grew fierce. "Your father always said that sometimes you don't fight to win. You fight because fighting is the right thing to do. The results are in God's hands, but the effort is in ours." They arrived at Ethan's house just after 5. It was a modest 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that spoke of comfortable middle-class stability rather than the ostentatious wealth of families like Bradley's. Ethan's mother was at work, which he said was probably for the best. She didn't need to be implicated in what they were about to do. They set up in the dining room, spreading out evidence, organizing files, preparing for Mrs. Chen's arrival. Grace ordered pizza, insisting that they needed to eat, even though none of them felt hungry. They picked at slices while reviewing their statements, making sure every detail was accurate, every claim supported by evidence. At 6:45, headlights swept across the front windows. Mrs. Chen had arrived early along with a camera operator and someone Ethan identified as her producer. Rebecca Chen was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and professional, despite the fact that she was barely 3 weeks out from surgery. She walked with a slight limp and carried a cane, but her handshake was firm and her gaze was penetrating. Mrs. Walker, she said warmly to Grace. Thank you for being such an excellent nurse and for trusting me with this story. Thank you for listening, Grace replied. Mrs. Chen turned to the twins and Ethan. All right, let me see what you've got. What followed was 2 hours of the most intense scrutiny any of them had ever experienced. Mrs. Chen watched every video, read every document, asked questions that cut to the heart of every claim. Her producer took notes, occasionally stopping to verify metadata on video files, checking timestamps, ensuring authenticity. This is incredible, Mrs. Chen finally said, sitting back in her chair. Not just the recent incidents with your daughters, but the pattern of behavior and cover-up. This is a major story. So you'll run it? Ethan asked, hope naked in his voice. I'll run it, Mrs. Chen confirmed. But I need to be clear about something. Once this airs, your lives are going to change. You'll be in the spotlight, which means you'll be targets. Bradley's father will likely sue for defamation. The school will try to discredit you. You might face harassment online and in person. Are you prepared for that? The twins looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations. Then Naomi spoke for both of them. We didn't ask for this. We just wanted to go to school, get an education, make our mom proud. But we're not going to stay silent so that bullies can keep hurting people. If speaking up means facing consequences, then we'll face them. Together, Naya added firmly. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. Then let's do this right. I'm going to interview each of you separately. I want your stories in your own words, authentic and true. The camera doesn't lie, but it also doesn't give second chances. Once you say something on record, it's permanent. Understand. They understood. The interviews took another 2 hours. Mrs. Chen started with the twins, asking them to recount everything from their arrival at Riverside High to this moment. She asked about their father, their training, the principles that had guided their response to the harassment. Both girls struggled to keep their composure when talking about their dad, their voices cracking as they explained how his teachings had kept them from responding with violence, even when violence seemed like the only option. Then she interviewed Ethan, who spoke about his own experiences, his 2 years of documentation, his uncle's systematic burial of complaints. His hands shook the whole time, but his voice remained steady, each word a small act of rebellion against the system that had failed him. Finally, she interviewed Grace, who spoke as a mother, a nurse, a woman who had sacrificed everything to give her daughters a better life, only to watch them be subjected to the same prejudices that had plagued her own education decades earlier. Do you think race played a factor in how your daughters were treated? Mrs. Chen asked. Grace was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I think that when my daughters walked into Riverside High, some people saw their skin color before they saw their humanity. I think that when they were harassed, some people assumed they must have done something to deserve it. I think that when they defended themselves, they were seen as aggressive rather than strong. And I think that if they had been white, if they came from wealthy families, if their last name carried weight in this town, this whole situation would have been handled very differently. It was the truth, spoken plainly and powerfully, impossible to deny. By the time Mrs. Chen and her crew packed up, it was nearly 10 o'clock. She promised the story would air the following evening at 6, giving them less than 24 hours to prepare for the storm that was coming. Get some rest, she advised as she left. Tomorrow is going to be intense. After she left, Grace sent the evidence to the 3 reform-minded board members, each email carefully worded to present facts without hysteria, truth without embellishment. Then she gathered her daughters, hugged them tight, and drove them home to their small apartment where the walls were thin, but the love was thick. That night, Naomi and Nia didn't train. They lay on their sleeping bags in the darkness, listening to their mother's soft breathing from the bed across the room, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" Nia whispered. "I think he'd be scared for us," Naomi whispered back. "But yeah, I think he'd be proud. I'm scared too." "Me too." They reached across the small space between their sleeping bags, hands finding each other in the darkness, holding on like they had since they were children, afraid of thunderstorms. The storm was coming. But they would face it together. Across town, Principal Morrison sat in his home office staring at an email from Rebecca Chen, requesting comment on allegations of harassment cover-up at Riverside High. His hands shook as he reached for his phone, dialing a number he'd called too many times before. "Richard," he said when Bradley's father answered. "We have a problem, a big one." And in his bedroom, Bradley Holt scrolled through social media, laughing at memes his friends had made about the ghetto twins, completely unaware that by this time tomorrow, the whole world would know his name for very different reasons. The truth was coming, carried on the voices of two girls who had stayed quiet when they were supposed to speak, and spoken up when they were supposed to stay quiet. Justice moved slow, but it moved inevitable as dawn. The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Grace Walker's phone began to ring. She fumbled for it in the darkness, her heart already racing, because calls before dawn never brought good news. The screen showed a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" Her voice was thick with sleep and worry. "Mrs. Walker, this is Dr. Patel from the school board. I apologize for the early call, but I've reviewed the evidence you sent last night. All of it. We need to talk, today." Grace sat up carefully, trying not to wake her daughters, who were still asleep on their sleeping bags, their hands clasped between them, even in slumber. "Of course, there's an emergency school board meeting being called for 9 this morning. The other members, I believe you contacted Mr. Washington and Ms. Rodriguez. We've been trying to address issues at Riverside High for years. This evidence, Mrs. Walker, this could finally be the breakthrough we need. But I need you and your daughters there. Will you come?" Grace looked at her sleeping girls, their faces peaceful, in a way they hadn't been while awake for days. "We'll be there." "Good. And Mrs. Walker, bring your own recording device. I have a feeling there are people who will try to ensure no official record of certain conversations exists." The call ended, and Grace sat in the pre-dawn darkness, her mind racing. An emergency board meeting meant the evidence had hit harder than they'd hoped. It also meant the fight was about to get uglier. She woke her daughters gently, the way she had when they were small, and she needed them ready for early morning doctor's appointments they couldn't afford to miss. "Girls, wake up. We have a school board meeting in 3 hours." Naomi's eyes opened first, instantly alert, in that way their father had trained into them. They saw the evidence. Dr. Patel called. She said it could be the breakthrough they need. "Or it could be a trap," Naya said, sitting up and rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Get us in a room, discredit us before the news story airs tonight." Grace nodded slowly. "That's why we're recording everything. And why we're calling Ethan. If his uncle is going to throw him under the bus, he deserves to face it with people who have his back." They dressed carefully, the twins choosing outfits that split the difference between respectable and authentic nice jeans. Modest tops, their hair in the same braids their mother had woven days ago. They looked like what they were. Good students, good daughters, good people who'd been pushed too far. Ethan met them at the district office at 8:45. He looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes red-rimmed, and his hands shaking as he clutched a folder containing printed copies of all the evidence. "My uncle called me at midnight," he said quietly, screaming about betrayal, about ruining the family name, about how I'd destroyed his career. Then his lawyer called at 2 a.m. and told me not to speak to anyone without legal representation. "Did you get a lawyer?" Naomi asked. Couldn't afford one. But Mrs. Chen connected me with a civil rights attorney who's working pro bono. She's meeting us here. He checked his watch. Should be here any minute. Right on cue, a sleek black car pulled into the parking lot, and a woman in her 40s emerged, all sharp angles and sharper intelligence. She introduced herself as Diane Foster, attorney at law, specializing in education discrimination and civil rights cases. "I've reviewed the evidence Mrs. Chen shared with me," she said, shaking hands with each of them. "What you've documented here is textbook institutional failure and possible civil rights violations. But I need to be clear, this meeting could go several ways. They might try to settle quietly, make this go away with apologies and promises. They might try to intimidate you into silence. Or they might actually do the right thing. We need to be ready for all three." "What do we do?" Naya asked. "Tell the truth. Don't embellish, don't get emotional if you can help it, and don't let them twist your words. I'll be there to object if they cross legal lines, but this is your story. Own it." The district office was an imposing building of glass and steel, its lobby decorated with photos of smiling students and inspirational quotes about the power of education. The irony wasn't lost on any of them as they signed in at the front desk and were directed to the third-floor conference room. The hallway outside the conference room was already crowded. Principal Morrison stood with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed man who looked like he billed by the minute. Bradley's father, Richard Holt, paced near the windows, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing angrily. Other board members arrived in clusters, some looking curious, others looking annoyed at having their morning disrupted. At exactly 9 o'clock, the conference room doors opened, and they were ushered inside. The room was designed to intimidate a long mahogany table, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs, one wall dominated by windows overlooking the city, another covered with portraits of former superintendents dating back decades. The 7 school board members sat along one side of the table. Dr. Patel, a woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair and kind eyes, sat at the center. To her left was Mr. Washington, a broad-shouldered black man, whose expression was carefully neutral. To her right sat Ms. Rodriguez, younger than the others, her face a mask of controlled anger. The other 4 board members ranged from openly hostile to carefully blank their loyalty to the old guard evident in their body language. Grace, the twins, and Ethan sat on the opposite side with Diane Foster at the end. Principal Morrison and his lawyer took seats near the door while Richard Holt remained standing, as if sitting would somehow diminish his authority. Dr. Patel called the meeting to order. "We're here to address serious allegations of harassment, bullying, and administrative misconduct at Riverside High School. Before we begin, I want to establish that this meeting is being recorded for the official record." She gestured to a court reporter in the corner that the Walkers hadn't noticed before. Richard Holt's lawyer immediately stood. "I object to these proceedings. My client hasn't been formally charged with anything, and this appears to be a witch hunt based on doctored videos and false allegations." "Your objection is noted and overruled," Dr. Patel said calmly. "This is a fact-finding session, not a trial. Everyone will have the opportunity to present their perspective." "Mrs. Walker, would you like to begin?" Grace stood, her hands steady despite the fear coursing through her. "My daughters transferred to Riverside High 4 days ago. In that time, they've been harassed, humiliated, and physically assaulted. When they defended themselves, they were suspended while their attackers faced no consequences. I'm here because the system failed my children, and I have evidence that it's been failing children for years." She nodded to Ethan, who pulled out his laptop and connected it to the room's display screen. What followed was 45 minutes of undeniable truth videos showing Bradley's pattern of harassment not just against the twins, but against other students. Documents showing complaint after complaint filed and buried. Emails between Principal Morrison and Richard Holt discussing managing situations involving Bradley. One email in particular made several board members gasp. It was from Richard Holt to Principal Morrison, sent 6 months prior. I appreciate you handling the incident with the Rodriguez boy quietly. As discussed, my firm will be happy to provide pro bono legal services to the district this year as a token of our continued partnership. Ms. Rodriguez's hands clenched into fists. The Rodriguez boy, she said, her voice shaking, is my nephew. He transferred schools after being hospitalized with a concussion. We were told it was a tragic accident during gym class. It was, Principal Morrison burst out. The investigation showed the investigation you conducted. Mr. Washington interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. The same investigation that somehow found no witnesses despite it happening in a crowded gymnasium. Ethan spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. I have video of that too. Bradley and his friends cornered Maria Rodriguez's nephew in the locker room after gym. They beat him while calling him slurs. I gave this to Principal Morrison, my uncle, and he told me the footage was too grainy to be useful. Principal Morrison's face went pale. Ethan, you don't understand. There are complexities, politics. I understand that you chose money over children, Ethan said, his voice breaking. I understand that you're my uncle and you let them hurt me and did nothing. I understand that perfectly. The room fell silent, except for the soft clicking of the court reporter's keys. Dr. Patel turned to Richard Holt. Mr. Holt, do you have anything to say in response to these allegations? Richard Holt's expression was a masterpiece of controlled rage. This is a coordinated attack on my family and my son. These videos are taken out of context. Boys engage in rough play. It's natural. It's how they bond. It's been happening in schools forever. My son is being vilified for normal teenage behavior because these people, he gestured dismissively at the Walkers, want to make everything about race, about discrimination, about victimhood. Normal teenage behavior. Naya stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. He poured food on us. He mocked our culture. He put his hands on my sister. That's not teenage behavior, that's racism and assault. You grabbed my son's wrist. Richard Holt's composure cracked. You physically assaulted him. After he tried to touch her hair without permission. Naomi cut in, standing beside her sister. We have it on video, multiple angles. He reached for me first. My sister stopped him from touching me. That's not assault, that's protection. One of the pro-Morrison board members, a thin man in an expensive suit, cleared his throat. Even if we accept that there was some unfortunate interaction between students, expulsion seems extreme. Perhaps counseling for all parties a fresh start. A fresh start? Grace's voice rose for the first time, years of biting her tongue to keep jobs and keep peace, finally erupting. My daughters did nothing wrong. They were harassed. They were attacked. And when they defended themselves within the bounds of the law and basic human dignity, they were punished. And you want them to go to counseling. Like they're the problem. Diane Foster placed a gentle hand on Grace's arm, a silent reminder to stay controlled. Then she addressed the board. Let's be clear about what the evidence shows. There's a pattern of behavior by Bradley Holt that constitutes harassment and assault. There's a pattern of complaints being systematically buried by Principal Morrison. And there's documented evidence of a financial relationship between Mr. Holt and the school that appears to have influenced administrative decisions. This isn't about boys being boys. This is about institutional corruption and discrimination. Discrimination? Richard Holt scoffed. That's a very serious accusation, one that my legal team will be addressing through proper channels. You can't just throw that word around. The proper term is racial harassment, Diane continued calmly, combined with retaliation against students who reported it, both of which are violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. The Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights will be very interested in these findings. The threat landed like a bomb. Federal investigation meant scrutiny not just of Riverside High, but of the entire district. It meant audits, interviews, potential loss of federal funding. It meant the kind of attention that ended careers and closed wallets. The pro-Morrison board members exchanged worried glances. Richard Holt's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Principal Morrison looked like he might be sick. Dr. Patel let the silence stretch, let the weight of consequences settle over the room. Then she spoke. I'm calling for an immediate vote. First on the suspension of Principal Morrison pending a full investigation into administrative misconduct. You can't do that, Morrison sputtered. I have contracts tenure. Tenure doesn't protect you from corruption, Mr. Washington said flatly. All in favor? Dr. Patel's hand rose, immediately followed by Mr. Washington and Miss Rodriguez. After a long pause, two of the other board members, clearly reading the writing on the wall, raised their hands as well. Motion carries, Dr. Patel announced. Principal Morrison, you are suspended with pay effective immediately. You will surrender your keys and credentials to district security before leaving this building. Morrison's face crumpled. Please, I have a family. I made mistakes, yes, but I was trying to do what was best for the school. What was best for the school, Ms. Rodriguez said, her voice, sharp as broken glass, would have been protecting every student equally. What you did was protect donors and destroy evidence. The two are not the same. Dr. Patel continued. Second motion, the immediate reinstatement of Naomi and Nia Walker with a formal apology from the district and expungement of all disciplinary records related to this incident. This vote was unanimous. Even the board members who'd been resistant knew they couldn't afford to be on the wrong side of this one, not with a news story about to air, not with federal investigators potentially coaching. Third motion. Dr. Patel said, her eyes finding Richard Holt, regarding Bradley Holt. Based on the evidence presented, I move for expulsion pending a formal hearing. Absolutely not, Richard Holt exploded. My son has rights. Due process. You can't railroad him like this based on heavily edited videos and the word of students with obvious agendas. The videos are time-stamped and verified, Diane Foster said. The metadata has been examined by independent experts, and there are multiple witnesses. Your son's due process will be served at the formal hearing where all evidence will be presented. But given the severity of the allegations and the pattern of behavior, immediate removal from the school environment is warranted for the safety of other students. The vote was closer this time, 4 in favor, 3 against. But it passed. Bradley Holt was expelled from Riverside High. Richard Holt's face went purple with rage. This isn't over, not even close. I will sue this district into the ground. I will personally destroy every one of you. When I'm done. Mr. Holt? Dr. Patel interrupted, her voice like ice. Are you threatening members of an elected school board? Because I should inform you that this meeting is being recorded and threatening public officials in the course of their duties is a crime. Holt's lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. Holt shook him off but managed to control his voice. My legal team will be in touch. This is far from over. He stormed out, his lawyer scrambling to follow. Principal Morrison left more slowly, his shoulders slumped, a man watching his career dissolve in real time. When the door closed behind them, the tension in the room didn't dissipate. it transformed into something else. Relief, maybe, or the exhausted satisfaction of a battle survived, if not quite won. Dr. Patel turned to the Walkers and Ethan. I want to apologize on behalf of this board and this district for everything you've endured. The system failed you. We failed you. And while we can't undo the harm that's been done, we can commit to doing better going forward. Words are easy, Naya said quietly. Change is hard. You're right, Mr. Washington agreed. Which is why we're implementing immediate reforms. Every complaint of harassment or discrimination will be reviewed by an independent committee, not school administration. There will be mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, and we're establishing a student advocacy office where concerns can be reported safely and anonymously. Ms. Rodriguez added, we're also reviewing all closed complaints from the past 5 years. If there are other students who were failed by the system, they deserve justice too. Grace nodded slowly. It wasn't enough justice delayed, was justice denied, and reforms wouldn't heal the wounds her daughters carried. But it was something. It was a start. What about Ethan? Naomi asked. He lost his relationship with his uncle because he did the right thing. Dr. Patel smiled sadly. Mr. Morrison, you showed extraordinary courage. Your documentation was meticulous, your integrity unshakable. That kind of character is rare. If you're willing, I'd like to recommend you for the district's new student advocacy position. Part-time paid, helping other students navigate situations like the one you survived. Ethan's eyes widened. You'd trust me with that? I'd trust someone who understands what it's like to be failed by the system to help fix that system, Dr. Patel said. Think about it. The meeting adjourned, but as they gathered their things, Ms. Rodriguez approached the twins. My nephew, she said quietly. He's at a different school now, doing better, but he still has nightmares. Thank you for being brave enough to do what we couldn't do for him. The weight of it settled over them, the understanding that their fight hadn't just been for themselves, but for every student who'd been hurt, silenced, or pushed out. They left the district office to find a small crowd of reporters already gathering, tipped off about the emergency meeting. Diane Foster held up a hand. My clients will have a statement after the Channel 7 news story airs tonight. Until then, no comment. The reporters shouted questions anyway, but the Walkers pushed through to their car, Grace keeping her daughters close protective, even in victory. At home, they collapsed onto the worn couch, the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving them exhausted and wrung out. Is it really over? Naya asked. The board part is, Grace said. But your lawyer was right. Richard Holt will come after us. Lawsuits, intimidation, trying to destroy our credibility. Let him try, Naomi said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. We have the truth. That has to count for something. That evening at exactly 6 o'clock, the Channel 7 News aired their story. Mrs. Chen had titled it, Failure to Protect How Riverside High Chose Money Over Students. It was devastating and thorough, featuring the videos, the buried complaints, interviews with the twins and Ethan, and most damning of all, expert analysis of the financial relationship between Richard Holt and the school. The story went viral within hours. Social media exploded with hashtags. Stand with the Walkers, Riverside exposed. Twin defense. Some responses were supportive, celebrating their courage. Others were viciously cruel, calling them troublemakers, race baiters, attention seekers. But the truth was out there now, undeniable, and spreading like wildfire. 3 days later, the Federal Office for Civil Rights announced an investigation into Riverside High School District. Richard Holt's law firm issued a statement saying he was taking a leave of absence. Principal Morrison resigned officially, his pension in jeopardy pending the investigation's findings. And Bradley Holt, the untouchable golden boy of Riverside High, found himself enrolled in a private therapeutic boarding school 3 states away. His college prospects dimmed his reputation, destroyed not by the twins he'd tried to humiliate, but by his own cruelty finally catching up to him. The twins returned to Riverside High on Monday morning. The school felt different, quieter, more watchful. Students who'd joined in the harassment now avoided eye contact. Teachers who'd looked away now made awkward attempts at kindness. But there were also students who approached them in hallways, quiet words of thanks, from kids who'd survived their own encounters with Bradley's cruelty. Support from unexpected places. And in the cafeteria, when Naomi and Nia sat at their usual corner table with their homemade lunch, something remarkable happened. Other students joined them. First Ethan, carrying his tray with a shy smile. Then a girl from their English class. A boy from physics. The sophomore who'd been in one of Bradley's videos stealing lunch money. Ms. Rodriguez's nephew transferred back to Riverside with his mother's blessing now that the environment had changed. The corner table that had been a place of isolation became a place of community proof that standing up for yourself could inspire others to stand up too. Grace watched it all unfold through updates from her daughters, through news coverage, through the slow transformation of pain into purpose. And every night before bed, she looked at the photo of her late husband and whispered, "They're just like you, strong, brave, and too stubborn to back down from what's right." The fight wasn't over. There would be legal battles, continued harassment from those who refused to see the truth, days when the weight of it all felt crushing. But the twins had learned something their father always knew. Strength wasn't about how hard you could hit. It was about how much you could endure while staying true to who you were. And they were still standing. The weeks that followed the news story felt like living in the eye of a hurricane. The calm at the center was deceptive, surrounded on all sides by chaos that threatened to pull them under at any moment. Grace had to change her phone number twice because of harassing calls. The twins' social media accounts were flooded with messages ranging from support to death threats violent enough that Diane Foster insisted they forward everything to the police. But something else was happening too, something quieter and more profound. Letters began arriving at their apartment, handwritten notes from parents whose children had transferred out of Riverside High in previous years, thanking them for exposing what they'd been too afraid to fight. Emails from students at other schools sharing their own stories of harassment and institutional failure. A package from a woman in Oregon containing a check for $500 and a note that read simply, "For your college fund. The world needs more people like you." Grace cried over that one alone in the bathroom, where her daughters couldn't see, overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers and the reminder that goodness still existed in the world. At school, the atmosphere remained tense, but transforming. The interim principal, Dr. Sharon Mitchell, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd spent 20 years turning around failing schools in underserved communities. Her first act was calling an all-school assembly. "I've reviewed what happened here," she'd said, her voice carrying to every corner of the auditorium. "And I'm ashamed. Ashamed that students were harmed. Ashamed that adults looked away. Ashamed that money and status were valued more than safety and dignity. That ends now, today. If you see something, you report it. If you're harmed, you speak up. And if you're the one doing the harming, you will face consequences regardless of who your parents are or how much money they donate. This is a school, not a kingdom, and every student here has equal value. The speech had earned scattered applause, mostly from students who'd been on the receiving end of Bradley's crew. But it also earned sneers and eye rolls from those who still believed the old hierarchy should stand. Change the twins learned was never clean or complete. It was messy, incremental, and required constant vigilance. 3 weeks after their return to school, Dr. Mitchell called Naomi and Nia to her office. They walked there with the muscle memory of dread. Even though rationally they knew this principle was different, Dr. Mitchell gestured for them to sit her office notably free of the donor photos and golf trophies that had cluttered Morrison's space. Instead, the walls held certificates in social work and education photos of her own children and a framed quote from Maya Angelou. "We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty." "I wanted to talk to you about something." Dr. Mitchell began, leaning forward, with her hands clasped on the desk. "I've been approached by several students asking if there could be a self-defense class offered as an after-school program. Not just martial arts for sport, but practical self-defense, with an emphasis on de-escalation and conflict resolution." Nia's eyebrows rose. "That's actually a good idea." "It is, and I'll be honest, I want you two to teach it." The twins exchanged surprised glances. "Us," Naomi said. "We're just students. We're not certified instructors." "Not yet," Dr. Mitchell agreed. "But I've spoken with Master Kim at the downtown dojo. He's willing to supervise and certify you as junior instructors if you're interested. The class would be twice a week voluntary, open to any student who wants to learn. You'd be paid a small stipend, and it would look excellent on college applications." "Why us?" Nia asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Dr. Mitchell smiled slightly. "Because you understand something that most self-defense instructors don't, that the strongest defense is knowing when not to fight. You two were harassed, provoked, and assaulted, and you defended yourselves with exactly the amount of force necessary, not more. That's discipline, that's wisdom, and that's what I want students here to learn." The twins sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the offer settling over them. Teaching would mean making themselves more visible, opening themselves up to more scrutiny and potential criticism. But it would also mean taking something painful and transforming it into something purposeful. "Can we think about it?" Naomi asked. "Of course. Take a week. Talk to your mother. But I hope you'll say yes." That evening, over dinner of red beans and rice that Grace had made stretched to feed them for 3 days, they presented the idea to their mother. She listened carefully, chewing slowly, her expression unreadable. When they finished explaining, she set down her fork and looked at each of them in turn. "Do you want to do this?" "I think so," Naomi said. "It feels like a way to honor Dad. Take what he taught us and pass it forward." "And it feels like reclaiming something," Nia added. "They tried to make us feel weak, dangerous, like our strength was a threat. This would be saying no. Our strength is a gift, and we're sharing it." Grace's eyes glistened. "Your father would be so proud of you. Both of you. Not just for standing up for yourselves, but for choosing to heal instead of harden." She reached across the small table, taking both their hands. "Yes, do it. Yes. Do, and I'll be at every class watching my babies teach the world what real strength looks like." The first self-defense class was held on a Tuesday afternoon in the school gymnasium. Dr. Mitchell had sent out announcements, posted flyers, even mentioned it during morning announcements. The twins arrived 30 minutes early, with Master Kim, a compact man in his 60s, whose gentle demeanor disguised the fact that he was a 6th-degree black belt who'd trained Olympic competitors. Remember, he told them as they set up mats, teaching is harder than doing. You must be patient. You must demonstrate. And you must never, never make students feel inadequate for not understanding immediately. They'd expected maybe 10 students to show up, maybe 15 if they were lucky. 43 students walked through those gymnasium doors. There were freshmen who looked terrified, seniors who looked skeptical, students of every race and gender and social status. Some came because they'd been bullied. Some came out of curiosity. And some, like Emma Chen, a junior who'd been one of Chelsea's closest friends, came looking for something that the twins couldn't quite identify but recognized as genuine. "Thank you for letting me come," Emma had whispered to Nia before class started. "I know I was awful to you. I laughed when Bradley. I'm so sorry. I want to be better." Nia had studied her for a long moment, looking for deception and finding only shame and hope. "Then be better, starting now." The class began with introductions and ground rules. Respect for every person. No judgment. No egos. The goal wasn't to create fighters, but to create people who felt safe in their own bodies, who understood their own power and when to use it. Master Kim started with basics: stance, balance, awareness of surroundings. The twins demonstrated their movements synchronized from years of training together, showing proper form for blocks, deflections, and escapes from common grabs. "Self-defense isn't about winning fights," Naomi explained to the class, echoing her father's words. "It's about ending them as quickly and safely as possible. The best fight is the one you never have." "But what if someone attacks you?" asked a freshman boy whose name tag read Marcus. "What if they don't give you a choice? Then you respond with appropriate force," Nia said. "Not excessive, not emotional, just enough to create distance and escape. Watch." She had Naomi demonstrate a wrist grab, then showed 3 different releases depending on the angle and force of the grab. The students practiced in pairs, the gymnasium filling with the sound of movement and occasional laughter when someone got the technique wrong and had to try again. What surprised the twins most was how hungry the students were, not just for the physical techniques, but for the philosophy behind them. During the cool-down stretches, hands shot up with questions. How do you stay calm when someone's trying to hurt you? How do you know if you're being too aggressive or not aggressive enough? What if the person bullying you is someone you thought was your friend? The twins answered honestly, sharing their own experiences, their own fears, their own journey from victims to survivors to teachers. Master Kim watched with approval, occasionally adding wisdom from his own decades of training, but mostly letting the twins lead. By the end of the 90-minute session, students were sweaty, tired, and transformed. Not in any dramatic way, they hadn't become warriors in a single class, but they'd learned that strength was something you could cultivate, that safety was something you could create for yourself, and that maybe, just maybe, they were capable of more than they'd believed. As students filed out, several lingered to thank the twins personally. Marcus, the freshman who'd asked about being attacked, approached shyly. "My older brother used to push me around," he said quietly. "Said it was just playing, but it hurt and made me feel small. I never knew I could do anything about it. This helps. Thank you." Emma Chen was the last to leave, pausing at the door. "Same time next week. Same time," Naomi confirmed. Emma nodded, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, Bradley texted me last week, from his new school. He's still angry, still blaming you for everything. But some of us know the truth now. Some of us are trying to be better." She smiled sadly. "It's harder than I thought, unlearning cruelty. But I'm trying." After she left, the twins helped Master Kim pack up the mats. He worked in silence for a few minutes, then spoke. "Your father trained you well, not just in technique, but in spirit. That is the harder lesson and the more important one." "You knew our dad?" Nia asked, surprised. Master Kim smiled. "We met at a tournament years ago. Different styles, but same philosophy. He spoke of his daughters often. Said you were his greatest achievement." He paused, his expression growing serious. "He also said that the world would try to make you hard, make you angry, make you bitter. His wish was that you would stay soft, where it mattered in your hearts while becoming strong everywhere else. I think you have honored that wish." The twins had to blink back tears, overwhelmed by this connection to their father, this confirmation that they were walking a path he would have approved of. The self-defense classes became a fixture at Riverside High, growing in attendance each week. By the second month, they'd had to split into 2 sessions to accommodate everyone who wanted to learn. Students who'd never spoken to each other found common ground on the mats. Social barriers that seemed insurmountable dissolved in the shared vulnerability of learning something new. But it was what happened outside the gymnasium that truly showed the ripple effect of their stand. Other schools in the district requested information about starting their own programs. A local news station did a follow-up story on the classes, this one celebrating transformation, rather than exposing corruption. And then, 3 months after the initial news story broke, Diane Foster called with unexpected news. "You've been invited to speak at the State Youth Summit on Anti-Bullying and Inclusion," she told Grace over the phone. "It's a big deal, 500 students from across the state, educators, policymakers. They want to hear your daughter's story." Grace relayed the information to the twins that evening. They sat on the worn couch in their small apartment, the same couch where they'd processed their suspension, their vindication, and every emotional earthquake since. That's really big," Naomi said slowly. "Too big?" Grace asked, studying their faces. "You can say no. You've already done so much." "No," Nia said firmly. "We should do it. Our story isn't just ours anymore. It belongs to every kid who's been bullied, every student who's been failed by adults who should have protected them. If telling it can help even one person find their strength, then we have to." The summit was held in the state capitol in a convention center that made Riverside High look modest by comparison. The twins stood backstage, wearing matching dresses that their mother had saved for months to buy, their hair braided in elaborate patterns that had taken Grace half the night to complete. "You ready?" Naomi asked her sister. "Terrified," Nia admitted. "But ready." They walked onto the stage to applause that washed over them like a wave. 500 faces looked up at them, students who'd survived their own battles, educators who wanted to do better, policymakers who held the power to change systems. Naomi stepped to the microphone first. She'd written notes, but decided to speak from the heart instead. 3 months ago, my sister and I walked into a school where we weren't wanted. We faced harassment, cruelty, and institutional betrayal. And we had a choice: stay silent and hope to survive, or speak up and risk everything. Nia took over their voices, weaving together the way their lives had always been intertwined. We chose to speak. Not because we're brave, we were terrified. Not because we're special. We're just 2 girls who miss our dad and wanted to make him proud. We spoke up because silence protects the wrong people. Silence gives power to bullies and takes it away from victims. And they shared their story, not dwelling on the pain, but highlighting the lessons. They talked about their father's teachings about discipline and restraint. They discussed the importance of evidence and allies. They acknowledged the adults who'd failed them, but also celebrated the ones who'd stood up: Dr. Patel, Mr. Washington, Ms. Rodriguez, Diane Foster, Mrs. Chen. And then Naya said something that would be quoted in articles and shared on social media for weeks to come. Our fists were never weapons. They were promises that silence ends here. Not just our silence, but the silence of every student who's been told to keep their head down, to not make waves, to accept cruelty as the price of admission to spaces where they have every right to exist. The applause was deafening. But more than the applause, it was the faces the twins saw students crying, nodding, finding recognition in their story. A girl in the third row mouthing, "Thank you." A boy in the back sitting up straighter, as if permission to be strong had just been granted. After the speech, students lined up to talk to them, to share their own stories, to ask for advice. Each conversation was a reminder that their pain had purpose, that their stand had created space for others to stand too. Among the crowd was a face they didn't expect to see Bradley Holt. He stood at the edge of the room, no longer surrounded by his crew, no longer radiating the arrogant confidence that had defined him at Riverside High. He looked smaller, somehow, diminished by consequences, and maybe, just maybe, by the first stirrings of actual remorse. When the crowd finally thinned, he approached slowly, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me," he said, his voice lacking its usual swagger. "And I know sorry doesn't fix anything. But I watched your speech, and I'm trying to understand why I was the way I was. My new school has mandatory therapy. It's been rough hearing what I did from a different perspective." Nia's first instinct was to tell him to leave to protect herself from any possibility of manipulation. But Naomi's hand found hers, a silent reminder of the principles their father had taught them, strength in mercy power, in forgiveness when it was earned. "Trying isn't enough," Naomi said carefully. "Understanding why you hurt people doesn't undo the hurt. But it's a start. Keep going to therapy. Keep listening. Keep learning. And maybe someday you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror without flinching." Bradley nodded, his eyes wet. "The kids at my new school, some of them have seen the videos. They know who I was, who I am. It's hard being on the other side of it." "Good," Nia said bluntly. "Maybe hard is what you need to become better." He left without another word, and the twins didn't know if he'd actually change or if this was just another performance. But they'd said what they needed to say, and his transformation, or lack thereof, was no longer their responsibility. The months that followed brought more changes. The federal investigation into Riverside High concluded with findings of systematic civil rights violations resulting in mandated reforms across the district. Richard Holt's law firm lost several major clients, and his political ambitions died before they could begin. Principal Morrison took a job at a private school in another state, his career permanently tainted. But the real change wasn't in the punishments handed down to those who'd done wrong. It was in the culture shift happening one student at a time. The self-defense classes continued expanding to include conflict resolution and peer mediation. The student advocacy office that Ethan helped establish fielded dozens of complaints that were now taken seriously, investigated thoroughly, and resolved fairly. Riverside High would never be perfect. No institution run by imperfect humans could be, but it was better. Measurably, demonstrably better. As for the Walker twins, they finished their first year at Riverside High with honor roll grades and scholarship offers from 3 universities. Their mother framed the acceptance letters and hung them on the wall of their small apartment, proof that darkness could be survived and futures could still shine bright. On the last day of school, the twins were called to the gymnasium for what they thought was a final self-defense class. Instead, they found the space transformed. The walls were covered with a mural that students had painted over the past month, a massive piece of art showing two girls in fighting stances, their bodies forming the words, "Strength equals respect," in the negative space between them. Dr. Mitchell stood at the center microphone in hand, surrounded by the students whose lives had been touched by the twins' courage. Naomi and Nia Walker, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the gym, came to this school seeking nothing more than an education. Instead, they gave us something far more valuable. They taught us what integrity looks like, what courage looks like, what strength truly means. She gestured to the mural. This will remain here in this gymnasium for as long as this school stands. A reminder that real power doesn't come from money or status or cruelty. It comes from standing up for what's right, even when it costs everything. Especially then. The students erupted in applause, chanting the twins' names, a sound that would have seemed impossible 4 months ago when they sat alone in a cafeteria corner, targets of hatred they'd done nothing to earn. That evening, back in apartment 4B, Grace made her daughter's favorite meal, their father's recipe for jerk chicken, that filled their small space with the smell of home and memory. They ate together on the couch, too exhausted for the table, comfortable in their exhaustion. "Your father would have loved today," Grace said softly, looking at the photo on the wall, him in his karate gi, grinning at the camera, forever frozen in a moment of joy. He always said that the warrior's path wasn't about defeating enemies. It was about creating peace where there was conflict strength, where there was fear and hope, where there was despair. "We didn't defeat Bradley," Nia said thoughtfully. "We just refused to be defeated by him." "That's the same thing," Naomi countered. "Sometimes winning looks like survival. Sometimes victory looks like showing up the next day with your head still held high." They finished their meal in comfortable silence, 3 women who'd survived loss and adversity, and came through it not unscathed, but unbroken, not unchanged, but not destroyed. Later that night, the twins performed their evening kata in the small space between the couch and the kitchen. Their movements precise and powerful, a meditation in motion that connected them to their father, to each other, to the strength that had carried them through the hardest months of their lives. When they finished, they bowed to each other, then to the photo of their father on the wall. Outside their window, the sun set over their neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In the distance, Riverside High stood quiet in the dusk, its gymnasium now home to a mural that would inspire future generations of students to stand to speak, to refuse to be silent in the face of injustice. The twins had walked into that school as targets. They walked out as teachers, as leaders, as proof that 2 black girls from a small apartment with second-hand backpacks and homemade lunches could change the world just by refusing to be anything less than who they were. Their fists had never been weapons. They were promises. Promises that silence ends here. Promises that strength comes from within. Promises that pain can be transformed into purpose, and victims can become victors, not through violence, but through unwavering dignity and unshakable resolve. The flame they'd lit, the flame of courage, of resistance, of transformation, had spread far beyond the cafeteria, where it began touching lives they'd never meet, inspiring stands they'd never witness, creating ripples that would extend long after they graduated and moved on to the next chapters of their lives. Because that's what real strength does. It doesn't just protect the strong. It empowers the vulnerable. It doesn't just win battles. It prevents future wars. It doesn't just change schools. It changes hearts' minds and the very definition of what it means to stand up for what's right. Naomi and Nia Walker had learned what their father always knew, that true power whispers instead of shouts, that real warriors choose peace over violence whenever possible, and that the strongest defense isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about standing firm in who you are when everything and everyone is trying to make you fall. They stood. They spoke. They survived. And in doing so, they proved that dignity is a weapon no bully can ever truly defeat.